Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to VMware Tanzu's Dev Deep Dive series. And that is Tanzu's Dev Deep Dive series. And I dare you say that 10 times fast because I can barely say it once slowly. In this series, we bring together experts in DevOps to discuss technical aspects of the industry and the trending topics that matters to developers. I'm Carlisia, and I am a senior member of technical staff at VMware Tanzu. This is our second installment of our Dev Deep Dive series, and I'm super excited to be the moderator for today's incredible panel. Today, it is all about enhancing the developer experience. I look forward to learning from these experts and also sharing my own experience with creating a positive, inclusive, and innovative developer experience. Be sure to follow along and know that you may drop your questions in the chat for our live audience Q&A during the last 15 minutes of the panel. Now let's get to know our three panelists. Meet Emily Freeman. Emily Freeman. Sorry, my accent. Thank you. She's the head of community engagement at AWS. And then we have also Brian Holt, developer experience product manager at Stripe. And last but not least, Soumeya Benghanem. Great, I didn't practice the last name. I will let her pronounce it.
Benghanem, but good try. I love it.
And Soumeya, thank you. And Soumeya is executive product manager at VMware. I'm looking forward to them sharing about their career journeys, advice, and resources for other developer leaders. So, thank you everyone for being here today. And let's start off by learning a little bit about these amazing, beautiful, competent, involved, engaged people. Yes. And learning about their personal journey. Can you please share a little bit more about your career journey and your experience leading developer teams? Brian, let's start with you.
Okay. So I've been a PM only for about, 4 years now. Before that, I worked as an engineer for a decade, as well as a developer advocate with Ms. Freeman herself at Microsoft. So I worked at Reddit and Netflix and LinkedIn and some other places as a engineer, and then I kind of wanted to start solving my own problems, and so I became a product manager on Visual Studio Code and JavaScript on Azure. And I started, and then from there I ended up at Stripe, and now I own all of the developer tools. So that's a bit about my journey.
Well, thank you so much for that, Brian. We love your background humming.
It just adds a certain kind of vagueness to put your name and lights behind you, which I possess.
It's like noise. It kind of, isn't that supposed to like soothe us in some way, or
yes?
No, I'm sure he'll deal with it.
Auditory massage.
Yeah.
Yes. Soumeya, please, let's go with you now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the fortune of being Carlisia's current colleague, although this is our first time meeting. So I'm excited for this conversation. I'm currently at VMware, and before that, I've been for about 20 years at other companies, mostly focused on B2B software and building technology and solutions for end users who happen to be developers a lot of times. So excited to talk to you all today.
Yes, and nice to finally meet you, Soumeya. It's one perk of working for big companies is I have noticed I can't cease to be amazed at meeting people for the first time, meeting amazing, involved people that I just hadn't met before. That just keeps happening, so I'm grateful. And now, finally but not least, please, Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm Emily Freeman. I lead community engagement at AWS. obviously we are careening toward reInvent. So I'm having a busy November, but I am thrilled to be here to talk about developer experience. This is something I'm very passionate about. I think we all are. So yeah, I'm excited to see where we all land around like how do we define developer experience and what do we think makes good developer experience.
Yes, I am so pumped to hear what you all have to say. I know I have opinions, and Emily is the only person here that I have been following on Twitter for a long time. All the three panelists are on Twitter, so follow them. They are pretty cool. I just started following Brian and Soumeya recently, so I'm very glad to actually be in the same virtual room with Emily. So interesting. I'm a big fan.
As long as Twitter exists, I will tweet. I feel like we're all in a burning building, not sure what to do, but hopefully it works itself out.
Then there is that. Yes, I hear you. All right, let's jump in here. Let's see. As far as user experience, customer experience, and others, since these terms have become so mainstream or pretty mainstream these days, there has been a rise in the prioritization of the developer experience. So what are some shifts that you have seen as developer leader over the last couple of years? Why this focus on developer experience seems to be important? Sorry, are you supposed to, Soumeya, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great place for us to start. So, some of the shifts I'm seeing, I've seen over the past couple of decades. So I might talk about them within that frame a little bit, but I'll talk about a couple and then I'll turn it over to my other fellow panelists to talk about additional ones as well. But the two that I want to really highlight is that there is a little more focus right now on the latter half or the latter end of the developer experience. If you were to think about the developer experience as a user journey, where day one you're working on software from day zero. Let's say it's new, it's beautiful, it's built quickly, agile, it's delivering user value. That's great. But then there is like the next step, which is software that has been around for a little bit. It has delivered value. It still delivers value, but it has a lot more complexity to it. So I think we're spending a lot more time now thinking about that complexity. How do you deal with it through different layers of abstraction, maybe? So that's one theme that we can talk about for a long time. And then the second one is treating developers like users. So whenever we're talking about user-centered design, there's this assumption that, sometimes that developers just want the coolest things. They want the newest technology, but that's not necessarily true. So how do we make them more productive? How do we take away some of their pain points? How do we create solutions that work for them regardless of what technology they're using? You hear about paved road options for developers within their enterprises or companies, but then a la carte options. So how do you deal with that kind of situation and provide solutions for your engineers that can meet any of those demands? So I love seeing those trends, but those are just a couple that we've been thinking about working on.
Very
I love
cool.
that.
I love that too. I could engage with that, but I want to give Emily a chance. Go on, Emily, please.
Thank you. No, those points are amazing. I think for me, a lot of things have shifted, and some things we've just rebranded, if we're honest. But we know that developers are making more and more purchasing decisions. It used to be that we would show up at conferences with T-shirts that says, I don't have purchasing power, please leave me alone. But now we know that whether you're actually the buyer or have extreme influence over that purchase decision, developers determine a lot of the tooling that gets utilized by companies from startups to the enterprises. And so we want to make sure that we're serving our customers in that way. But you mentioned complexity, Soumeya, and you have to talk about just how complex the ecosystem has become. You know, I always use the CNCF map just as a sort of overwhelming kind of visual, because there's so many tools, there's so many decisions we have to make, and that decision fatigue is real, and it impacts our daily work. I think we talk a lot about developer productivity. I want to take it one step further, because I'm not in this work because I want to make developers more productive. I'm in this work because I want to make development more joyful, right? Like, I want developers to come into work every day and be excited and create and tinker and learn and share. So that for me is my North Star and my motivation. And I love that developer experience sort of encapsulates a lot of those solutions that we've talked about.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I want to get my 2 cents in, but let's get Brian a chance as well. Please, Brian.
Well, feel free. You can just interrupt me. That's fine. That's what Emily does anyway. So, I am fully inclined to agree with both Soumeya and Emily. One of the biggest things that I've certainly noticed at Stripe is that developers are driving a lot of those product buying decisions. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this on camera, but Stripe is not the cheapest product. I think that's fairly well known. I don't think that's very controversial. I'm not going to get fired for that one. But people continually choose it because we have an awesome developer experience, and it's kind of a company that's made its name and its brand around, we're going to make it really easy for you to move money, and I think that's why Stripe continues to do really well. One of the other things I've noticed, and again, I'm kind of biased here because I used to work on it, but more companies are trying to meet developers where they are. And when I say that, I mean things like having VS Code extensions, having CLI extensions. More and more companies are looking at like, people don't necessarily want to go to the portal all the time, or they don't want to just live in the documentation. They want to have interactive experiences like GitHub Copilot, right? Or they want to have they want to be able to code from their iPhone from the beach, right? And more things like that of companies, whether that's like Microsoft with VS Code, or like Stripe, we have the VS Code extension that you can actually code without ever hitting the documentation. And that's something I'm pretty excited about because it's allowing developers to go faster, right? Build really cool things. We're removing solved problems from developers' pathway to success, which I love doing that, right? And hence why you find me at Stripe these days. So I don't know. I liked everything that everyone said. I'm going to stop now. Okay, bye.
I just want to add one thing quickly, because some of the stuff we talk about is new, like being a developer on the beach. I mean, writing code while you're on the beach. But the reality is I still work with some enterprise customers who don't even have the latest version of anything, let alone allow their developers to work in a more flexible, more joyful kind of space that they want to be in. And so there is, I think we've been probably in this space talking about this, there are these companies that are continuing to innovate and push the envelope in every direction. It's not just on their product that goes to market, but also internally on the experience for their people, including developers. And then there are these sometimes huge behemoth kind of companies lumbering around and still treating technology as one thing and business as another, and not as a common product. So it's probably something to talk about when it comes to culture, not just the tools. How do you create that for developers so you can get the best and the most innovative and joyful experience for them?
I absolutely love that, and it very much brings up for me this question of purpose, like Emily mentioned hers, and I love. I see a lot amongst our community that people are very in touch with their purpose. Like I am doing this because I have this greater purpose, more that goes beyond what I am actually doing day to day. It's like a greater goal, and it's lovely that we each have a different purpose, because obviously if we had pursuing the same thing, who would take care of the other aspects, right? So it's great that we have these people with connection to their purpose. My purpose is I see a lot of possibility for creativity if we get the drudgery out of the way. And Soumeya, when she was speaking, she was talking about how developers have this reputation of trying to reinvent the wheel, build things randomly, something like that. And I think it's true that developers have this attitude of like, I can build something. So if I don't have it, I will just make it myself. And I think this gets very misunderstood. It has a potential to be very misunderstood. Obviously, there is like when we talk about culture, there are some cultures there don't trying to bring that in with some procedures and processes. So we know how that goes when that is not there. But there is also, there can be a lot of frustration because lack of guidance. In this world, this new world of ours right now, there's so many choices, and in a way, things got more limited. In a way, things got more expensive. So it's very important for us to be talking about this. What do developers need to help guide them? Because there are a lot of tools out there, and in the spirit of helping guide them, we really need to look at in my opinion, what are the needs the developers have, and I think this has changed greatly. Before, developers were very self-sufficient in the sense that they could just run one monolith app, build that, and deploy it themselves, and it was sort of simple. The problem there that I found, that I encountered in my career, was every job I got, the development process was like I had to relearn the whole new thing because it was all over. Each company used a different tool. That's why I love Kubernetes, because if everybody used Kubernetes deployment, it would be like this one way. But I mean, we can use tools on top of that. But I can always look under the hood. I always say that I can always look under the hood if I want to. Either they did that or they only deploy, or they only coded. And today, like Emily was saying too, and Brian, I'm sorry, I'm not like spotlighting you, but you were the third and I forgot what you said. Sorry. But so, so we extracting things that were in the application outside. And so like networking, like how do we make one layer of networking that works for all the apps, all the services, whereas before it was just like one thing over here, like for networking stuff inside the app. So the needs are completely different, and things are very complex, and developers are finding themselves in a place of like, I need to understand this so I can design my application better. So it's a very new world out there. We have to have more like sysadmins skills, it seems like it to me. So that's, I think, why we focus on developer experience here. And so what would you say is the biggest obstacle to that developer activity, and what advice do you have for leadership that is actually concerned about this stuff? Emily, you go first.
So I think when we talk about developer productivity, we often default to tools, and whereas that is very, very important, and there's a ton of things to talk about around that, like the complexity of it, the decisions, integrations. We talk about, using dozens of tools, but never really cover the weeks of work it takes to make all those tools play nicely together. But I'll take a different approach, because if you know me, you know that I love the human side of tech. And I think a lot of our technical problems are actually human based, because while we are beautiful and wonderful, we are deeply flawed as a species. So I think, a lot of times it's actually this balance of autonomy and ensuring that developers, development teams, engineering groups, even the other teams, the ones that aren't necessarily writing code every day, but are technical in their own right, giving them space to make decisions based on their specific constraints, requirements, making sure that they're able to move quickly when they need to and slow down when they need to. A lot of times we kind of hit the gas and it's like, we'll never let up. But if in the long run, going slower now is better, then that's what you should do. And giving people the opportunity to independently make those choices is really, really important, without negative consequences, right? No public shaming, no firing, none of this. And I think it's really important, like, especially right now, I don't know if we're allowed to use the R word yet. recession. I've heard it referred to as the macroeconomic situation. Like, oh, that's interesting. But we're all reading the news and we all know what's happening. And I think right now we're in a really unique economic situation where a lot of companies are making hard choices. And there is an excuse, I think, to pare down development teams. And we're seeing, some consequences of that in real time with certain companies. But making sure that we slow down and we make the right decisions. I think we've oversimplified and we've sort of made it seem like development is easier than it is. Ultimately, it is really, really difficult. And there's a reason that, we are in these roles and we struggle and we move slow sometimes because it is hard. And so all that to say is, I think providing teams the resources and the opportunities to make independent decisions, to understand the context of the business needs, that why of what we're doing something, it's really, really important. And I think ultimately that leads to a happier developer experience in their independent roles.
Man, yeah, we are system thinkers. And when we look at our work outputs, that's how we think, right? But it's very interesting to see that when it comes to handling people and we see leadership succeed and fail, we see that out there. Things are ever more public, so it's our learning opportunity for all of us. I see that sometimes we fail to think in systems when it comes to people, how doing something over here with this person or this group of people or this department influences the other parts of your organization. And so I love that line of thinking. And I also think, when you put a ladder against a wall that is not the right wall, but you'd only find once you get up to the top. I mean, what if you had just stopped to make sure you putting a ladder in climbing the right wall for you, right? Brian, what do you think?
We're having audio issues, Brian.
Okay.
It's bad. Maybe.
Can we get the other Brian? Oh, Brian, it's so terrible.
How's that? Is that any better?
What you're saying.
Okay.
Oh, yes. The other Brian is
the other Brian is here now.
That's the Brian we want.
The smart Brian. The other one was the dumb Brian. So I love that you talked about systems. I actually have a class these days on systems, so all I ever talk about is systems and like interventions in systems and things like that. The thing that came to mind when I saw this question was basically lots of companies build the wrong product. There's lots of wrong products to build. There's only a few correct products to build. Kind of to Emily's point, companies don't slow down. They don't bother to do the research of what users actually want. I see a huge problem with they'll get feedback from like one of their biggest customers. Like for me, when I was at Microsoft, it was always, what does Walmart want? We're going to build that, right? And so the users will say that they want one thing, you give it to them, and then they're like, never use it, and it's incredibly frustrating, right? So it's huge to, and I'm specifically talking to leadership now, it's huge to slow down, to do the research, to look at the metrics, to talk to your customers, to do the user research studies where they like watch people use it and then see how they're using your product and what they should be building and things like that. And then going back and then just iterating with customers in mind. All too frequently, I see companies build something that they want users to use because it's beneficial to them. Either like it drives down cost or it drives them to use a product that's more expensive or drives revenue in a certain way. And they're not prioritizing users' needs, they're prioritizing their own needs, and they're just kind of shoehorning their customers into it, and people don't like that, right? They'll find customers they'll find vendors that allow them to do the thing that they actually want to do. So I think I basically just re-explained Emily's answer in a slightly different way, and I'll take credit for that. So yeah.
I love it that you put it this way because it is so important. What you said is like the story I told this time. We have been talking about this for the freaking ever. Like match what they like. How do we figure out what the user really wants? Because that really plays into the developer productivity. Developers are not, their productivity is not, in happiness is not measured by the number of lines of code that they output. Is my creation being used in the world and being of service? So if you can just narrow that and really try to get a match as close as possible, it is such a big win for developer productivity, and I would say happiness.
Yeah.
So it's so important. We have to keep repeating because we have to keep repeating. That's where we are. Soumeya, what would you like to say about that?
For me, I'm gonna plug right into the same theme, which is, when I think about designing good products, whether it is for a developer or for a mom who can also be a developer, or, a child, it doesn't really matter. There are almost 30 million developers in the world today, and they're just growing exponentially. And so taking the good design thinking and using that rigor in creating solutions for engineers becomes really important. Again, I think I've seen enough situations, even in forward-thinking organizations, where designers don't get involved in developer tools. So sometimes just bringing that same discipline of user-centered design, designers, researchers into the equation, into the solutioning, can push us much further in the advancement of creating solutions that lack friction, that actually can jump multiple steps ahead beyond like the obvious solution in front of you right now. And then the last one, I think when we're talking about culture overall and generative cultures and being more outcome oriented, from a product management perspective, that's the thing I care about. And I know that the engineers on the teams I work with, that's what they care about. They want the corporation, they want the enterprise to be less restrictive and specific about what they must use, and to be more focused on what is this outcome we're trying to achieve, and then allow them a little more autonomy in designing those solutions. So if we hit all these parts, a little bit on the culture, a little bit on creating solutions that, that have that rigor of design built into them for this outcome, I think we can do a lot with eliminating the obstacles.
I absolutely love that, and that made me think about rumors. Rumors have it that people who work in finance, they make a lot of money. I never worked in finance myself, like stockbroker, that kind of industry. And somehow, I don't know, maybe someday I ask somebody why they particularly make a lot of money, and somebody explained, because they are handling a lot of money. You don't want somebody who handles a lot of money to not make a lot of money, because it's just like sort of creates like maybe a conflict. Maybe some people want to get away with taking some of that money for themselves, right? So it's like the parallel here is, how incongruent is it that a lot of companies are asking developers to build these systems with beautiful APIs and user interface, and that works really well, has a great user experience, and we ourselves are not really having beautiful tools. No, I so agree with that. I want that. And in addition to having very useful tools that work for me, for that use case, for what I'm working with, right, in my team, I also want multiple tools, because why have one tool when I can use multiple? And I see a lot that to this day, we're very locked into like, this is the tool. No, this tool is good for this. We can also have 3 others that are good for other things. We can, I mean, it is a cognitive load, but just, you don't need to, you can have one that's like the main one, but let people choose what works best for them. And sometimes it's multiple tools. So we don't have that line of thinking. We just don't for developers, and we need to change it. Okay, I'm the moderator here, sorry. Going forward. So the next question is sort of like the flip question of the last question, which was what's the biggest obstacle to developer activity? Now I would like to ask you, what are the key ways to improve the developer experience, and with an example? And let's focus on the key here, like, because there are many different ways. But for you personally, like given your particular passion, what do you think is key, like your flag to improve the situation? And if you have examples of like failure, like that doesn't work, so don't go there, or success, either way, bring it on. And Emily, please start.
This is a great question. I'll go more product focused for this question. So I have a daughter, she's 7. We've seen Frozen 2 at least 200 times. And so there's this song in Frozen 2 called, I think it's The Next Right Thing. And so she goes around singing, you know, it's Disney, so they rip your heart out. But I think about that a lot, the next right thing. And I think when I'm considering a developer tool or a developer product, I think a lot about that. Like, is it guiding me toward the next right thing? It doesn't mean that I have to use that. It doesn't mean that I have to choose that, but is there an option to choose that? I think that's really, really important. I think something we think about at AWS a lot is avoiding abstraction walls. You know, when we talk about providing these solved problems, it's usually in the form of an abstraction, which is very powerful. But if you can't look under the hood, like you were mentioning earlier, Carlisia, then it's not, at some point you're going to hit a wall. At some point you're going to hit a limitation of what it can actually do, or your understanding of the tool. And so while I think it's really important to balance that out and to provide developers this ultimate visibility and understanding of what's actually happening under the hood, it is also really important to guide for the next right thing. And make sure that it's easy to get there. You know, I work with someone at AWS called Scott Kate. He's amazing. And he just recently came up with this metric that I really like. It's time to success. And so when you're utilizing a tool, what is the time to a success? If it's a CI/CD pipeline, when you kick off that sort of workflow, how quickly does it work through and you actually deploy to an environment? That would be a time to success. And lots of different products are going to have different measures, but being able to have a win early on, I think, is also really, really important.
I love the idea of this metric is time to success, because it just makes room for us to think that each thing has success, looks and smells in a different way. Yeah. Because otherwise we get, like you were saying, Emily, developer work is hard work. All this work, systems work is hard work. And that includes technical writing, which is so key. That none of this works well without all the technical work that goes into it, not just development. But we're here today talking about developers. And if we don't keep in mind that each thing there is something that looks right, it smells right in opposite. Otherwise, we just like, let's just do more, right? It's just like put something out there, just do it somehow. It's working, it's in progress, but you know, sometimes it's speed, sometimes it's quality, sometimes it's usability. So it's lovely that you are looking at things that way. Brian, you're next.
Well, you see in the Disney movie Frozen 2, there's a song called Into the Unknown. No, I'm just kidding. I really like Time to Success. I also really like Scott, so it's funny that you bring him up. The way that I've always expressed that is a developer comes to your product with an intent, and how long does it take them to express their intent, right? And so I think that's relatively the same way of stating. Again, I'm just restating what Emily says and taking credit for it. The way that I try and think about the products that I build for developers is you want to make like the 85 to 95% use case really streamlined. And then you want to make the 15 to 5% use case possible, right? We try and build these infinitely flexible tools, and we end up building these complex messes that are so difficult to configure, so difficult to use that people just get frustrated. And Kubernetes is awesome, but it is definitely an example of a tool that is infinitely flexible and can be a bit unruly to tame, right? Actually, Mesos would even be another better example of that, right? It can do anything, and it's terrifying. So anyway, that's kind of the thing that I try and encourage people to one, you have to go figure out what that is. So I'm going back to, you need to go talk to your users, you need to observe your users, and like, what's their intent? What are they trying to do when they come to your product and start using it? And then try and make that very, very streamlined, because you think you have an idea of how people use your product and you are absolutely incorrect, right? And so you have to go and you have to go figure that out from them, because you're going to guess and you're going to get it mostly wrong most of the time. It's actually one of the reasons I became a PM. I remember sitting in one of the user studies for VS Code, and I think it was for like Jupyter notebooks, right? And I thought I had a really good idea of how people use Jupyter notebooks inside of VS Code, and I was wildly wrong. And I was like, this is amazing. I was so wrong. I got addicted to that cycle of making a guess and being very wrong, which, you know, I guess I could go to Vegas and that would be a little bit more expensive way of doing that, but anyway. So observe your users, try and make that default use case work out of the box, and then try and make that 15% use case possible with like minimum possible cognitive burden, right? Because people have to learn how to use your product, right? I mean, like I deal with money, right? Like dealing with the banking system is way more complicated than I ever thought it was. And that's why Stripe is a successful company. But trying to, for people that are just accepting payments, we want to like, here, give us a credit card number, we'll give you, you know, that, you know, token back. But then you have companies like Lyft that have to like move in like a three-way marketplace, which is really difficult. And so we have to make those possible as well, without, you know, overwhelming them with a Kubernetes level of complexity, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I am really sitting here waiting for when I get to argue, because I mean, I'm really good at arguing, so I'm just waiting for that.
You can tell me why Kubernetes is a great product. I'd like to pick on it a lot.
You want to argue that? But so here's the thing that really got me fired up about what you were saying, Brian. I love this idea of starting with intention. For me, it's like people who speak different languages, the language, if you look historically at languages, and I speak multiple languages, so I'm a bit tuned into that. Language influences your behavior, and the behavior influences languages. So the way people speak the actual native language that we have, is very telling. It's very telling about how they see the world. It's mind blowing if you haven't looked into that and want to look into that. So that is exactly it for me. When you start with intention, you're going to proceed in a certain way. You're going to see things that you would not see. You wouldn't allow yourself to see if you didn't start with an intention, because the difference is, you start with an intention, you know you're going to have to verify your intention. It's like having a thesis, and now you have to prove it or disprove it. It's how it is. And if you don't, you just start either with a lot of certainty or a lot of doubt, and neither is good. So I love that. It is a very specific, very distinct way to approach anything, to start with an intention. I absolutely love it. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but anybody can jump in, or we can go to Soumeya. I'm sorry, Soumeya.
That's okay, no problem. You're fine. So I want to build on that story, because between what Emily said and what Brian said, you have this beginning of the story, but then how do you go to market to your own developers? You know, this is something I've learned from my marketing teams, or the teams I've collaborated with, which is to treat even internally, my end customer, in this case, it's the developers, as I would any customer outside. They go through a funnel, they go through a journey, they go through this awareness to conversion kind of continuum. And I think sometimes we take that journey for granted. We think, oh, the VP is going to send an email and people are going to do it, and it's going to be implemented, and it's going to be the best thing. Why wouldn't they implement it? We did all this user research in the beginning. We built this amazing thing for them, and etc. So to me, I'm talking about this adoption part that also becomes very important for engineers. Yes, you have talked to a lot of them in the early days to try to develop a solution, but at the end of the day, you didn't probably talk to 80% of them. And so how do you show them the value of what you created? How do you bring them along? How do you, actually change some of the behaviors or the things that they used to do in, let's say, an older technology, so that they can achieve the benefits that they themselves actually want, but they're not seeing it yet. They're just seeing it as a, requirement from the boss to use this new thing. So to say that in summary is treating the engineers when it comes to adoption or conversion, to use a marketing term, the same way we would treat any customer we would outside of the company who would be paying for this software or this solution.
Yeah, I love that. And it's one of those things that it really takes time to do it approximately right. And we've seen it done right with customers, with engineers. We have seen it. That it's like you're saying, Soumeya, if you are doing research and you do it with 20% of the engineers and you think, well, 20% is good enough. I mean, how much homogeneous is your company, right? If it's like pretty close to 100, I'd say, yeah, that might be a good enough. I don't know. You have to evaluate it, right? But it's different. It's different. If your company is not homogeneous, you cannot do the same as if your company was completely homogeneous. That number should be different because people are different. People, they have different needs. They have different expectations and different goals. So it really pays off to know how much, who you're going to engage with this. It takes time. It takes time, and I'm so with you. If we know that we have to do that with customers, why not do the same with the engineers? I mean, it makes a difference. It just makes sense. And so let's see. I think we covered everybody for this one. Yeah. Yes. We ready for the next? Okay. Because the next one is so much a follow-up of this. I think with everything, we hinted at this, and I know we hinted at this because this is a subject that's very close and dear to my heart, and I've heard it in all the answers. But I want to ask specifically for you all to be very explicit in sharing with us an example or a theory of why the developer experience and happiness, why and how it impacts the business success. Because this is something that is so easy to resist, especially if you're not a developer. If you're in leadership and you're not a developer, and it's so easy to interpret this as like, oh, it's resistance, or it's just that it goes to their reputation. They just want to work with the tool that's not the tool I offer. It wouldn't matter which tool I offer. They just want to use something else. They would just want to build it themselves. This is so strongly a reputation that developers have, and I feel for both sides, because how do you know? So why would you even want to know is the question. As a leader, and if you don't have that empathy because you haven't been a developer, and that's obviously fine. I'm glad not every leader is a developer. We don't want homogeneity. Homogeneity? I don't know. In that way, you know what I'm saying. We want variety. We want people from all walks of life to lead us and be creative. I love it. So why would they even want to look into this? Why would they want to provide better tooling for developers? What could be an impact in the business success, right? Because that is, as a developer, I want to make money too. I want to have a high salary. I want to have stocks. We're thinking of that too. We all want the business to succeed. That should be the theory. But why? Why should the leadership be looking into this stuff? And how would they measure? So let's try to be very specific and explicit, please. Let's say, Brian, you go first.
My answer to that is retention. Particularly amongst your smaller users. Like, most of us want to build things, and I think this is actually really to Soumeya's point. I guess it's my turn to steal your point, Soumeya. People don't get to know all of their demographics of users, especially when in their go-to-market strategies, and they start building things for people that they think they're going to make them money, right? Or whatever persona that they're over-focusing on. And so for like a big cloud provider that's focusing on like your top 500 customers or top 100 customers, whatever dumb metrics we're measuring these days. And those companies sign these super long multi-year contracts. They have like reserved contracts and things like that, so they can't churn, right? Because they have all this like pre-allotted spend, right? So whether or not you give them a bad developer experience, it does not matter because they're stuck, right? So one of the tenets I actually really love from Stripe is we explicitly target winning startups, right? Because startups have such a low tolerance for things that are hard, things that are too expensive, and if they see another thing that's like taking Stripe for example, if there was someone that had the same developer experience but was cheaper, they would definitely jump to that because they're just trying to survive, right? And so that retention is the answer to the question of like how do you measure it, and specifically the examples that I could give. I think Stripe is a good example of it. The one that came to mind immediately was like the serverless revolution, right? Where serverless is expensive. I don't know if anyone's tried to run like entire businesses on serverless. It's not cheap. It's certainly more expensive than just getting some instances and running your own Kubernetes clusters and things like that, but it's hard, right? You are doing serverless because it drastically favors the developers. They don't have to worry about deploying things. They don't have to worry about scaling things. They can just worry about solving business problems, right? And so that is the fact that serverless has stuck around despite its price tag, and despite all of its weird stuff, that behaviors and stuff like that, is a really good example of that developer experience can lead to business success.
Wow, Brian, I feel like you took the knife and you just went for it, right at the heart. Without developers, you can't do anything, basically, right? So I totally get that. And the thing that it is that there's more work to be done in tech than there are developers to do it. It's just how it is. And the experience that comes is hard to get this experience because development is not easy. And so it takes time to build that experience. And it's where we are with the industry. We have been here for a long time. Yeah, there are layoffs, but there is so much work to be done because we are in this phase of innovation where there are a lot of new tech and new patterns and new processes there are allowing companies to really jump ahead, sort of like settle like let's make this all this work that is non-creative, repetitive, automate, have a process around it, and then do work on a secret sauce. That's what I love. That's what drives me. Like, how can we take care of all this stuff, totally solvable, if we take the time, if we focus, if we have the right skills, etc., and then focus on what we can create. And that's why we keep getting, we get this technology, the service, and we're loving everything, and everything's getting easier. In terms of the products that are available for us to use in our day-to-day smart technology, smartphones. So I want more of that. But we need developers. Let's see, who is next? I got too excited. I lost my place. Thank you. Jump in, please.
No problem. So, definitely retention, sometimes employee NPS, but I want to talk about DORA metrics. I know they're old. I know they've been around for a long time, but they tell a lot of things. They're simple metrics. They're 4 things. A lot of people have learned about them over time, but below them, there is like this whole world of complexity that tells you about culture, that tells you, yes.
Soumeya, I am so sorry. What metric? I did not catch that.
DORA, the DevOps metric. Yes.
All right. I am not familiar with that. So
all right.
There we go.
So the DORA metrics, there are 4 of them, and one of them that's similar but doesn't tell the whole story to time to success, or like what was the, Emily, what was the metric you mentioned earlier at the top of the show?
Time to success. Yes, TTS.
Time to success. Yeah. So in Dora, for example, they have lead time to change, but change in itself is a very, black and white thing. The code went from, this place where it was built to where it was deployed. Success adds the complexity of the user saying, "Oh, this is successful. We're gonna buy it." And sometimes you can see that that evolution of the metrics if you put Dora plus revenue plus, let's say, retention. You can have a really vibrant set of metrics. But I wanted really to focus my answer on Dora because over the years I've gotten a chance to work with them, and I've seen how they, in different environments, different cultures, including, let's say, in a military branch of the US, where you expect there to be a lot of bureaucracy, they can be years ahead in terms of being a generative culture and open culture than a company that's not considered a Fortune 500. So I think maybe sometimes we have assumptions about how culture and metrics can lead to only one direction. But what the point I'm making here is there is complexity, and sometimes you need to look at more than one. And then as you fix one issue, it can positively lead to improvement across all four. A specific example here is with one of the companies I've worked with here through VMware. As we moved their teams from a non-Kubernetes platform, let's say that, towards one that offered them both a paved road with a very specific tool chain, plus a bring your own if you want to. We've seen their ability to deliver value to production move a lot faster. There were, let's say, 75% of the teams wanted to go with the paved road option, where their tool chain was already designed for them and they just plugged into it. So they got a lot of the benefits of, let's say, observability and deployment speed built into it because it was approved by the corporation. Their speed was a lot faster. The people who brought their own software improved as well, but it wasn't at the same amount. We gave them the choice. We allowed them to choose the levels of service they want. We allowed them to choose the kinds of tools they want. And that was reflected at the end of the day in the lead time to change, which the business also cared about. So that's one example here.
I love that. And just to jump in, Google just released a new report for Dora. Originally, it was DevOps Research and Assessment, led by Nicole Forsgren. It was acquired by Google. They just did a new report, and it's really interesting. So it's I recommend everyone go and read it. So thank you for bringing that up, because those are solid metrics to measure. I think going back to the original question, which is how do you show developer experience, developer happiness toward business value and business bottom lines, right? Like, so I have done more than my fair share of corporate budgeting. And I think one of the mistakes we do is we don't functionally understand how valuable developers moving quickly and efficiently is to the bottom line. A lot of times when we look at budgets, we look at, the actual costs of tools, and then you talk about personnel, but there's not really this understanding or this sort of real delineation between having to understand what a developer actually costs. And so our developers are expensive. Like we are expensive, and making sure that we are efficient is really, really important. I think it probably applies to all humans, but I think developers in particular, the more you push, the more resistance you will receive. So I find that when I'm working with development teams, if you're really pushing folks to hit a deadline, there's this really high stress environment, they don't function well, because for all the ones and zeros and the sort of scientific STEM elements of tech, we are very much a creative creative like discipline. I mean, we are creating something from nothing, and that takes time to sit and think and be open to sort of that creativity. That doesn't happen in high stress. I don't know about you all. I don't operate well when someone's like on my back yelling at me. And so I need that time and space to really enjoy and feel like I'm contributing to that greater vision. You know, looping back to one of our earlier conversations at the top of the hour was really talking about having this higher purpose. I think a lot of us align to a higher purpose, and making sure that that is seen in our everyday work is a really powerful way to make developers more efficient.
I love that, Emily. Yes, I think so much of it comes down to developers have experience and they have a lot to contribute, and they want to be heard, but it's not something unique to developers. So when there is that dynamic of pushing, it just automatically makes me think, well, there is no listening happening there. So whenever you see that dynamic happening, you might want to take time. It's the thing. It takes time to go fast. And that's another thing. It's like developers can move really fast, be in a flow, and be very creative. There's a lot of creativity that goes into it. But it's like setting that up, that takes time. But if you get it, if you set it up, you can get so much out of that one setup, right? But
there's a saying in the military that says slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I like to kind of apply that.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. We are at the top of the hour, almost. I very much would like to ask. So we have Ferris working on the background, and we have a question from the audience that I very much would like for you all to answer. And just let's have like empathy for our dear leaders who work so hard, and we are either developers ourselves, or we work helping guide developers, or work helping guide people who guide developers. For the people who are in position of leadership that have to guide developers, have to make that whole system work, what is a skill that you think would be key for a person in that position to have? And let's maybe throw it like that you don't see, that you see that is lacking out there, or that you see it's out there and it works really well. Either way. So let's say, Emily, you go first.
I think if I had advice, and I'll keep it quick to one sentence or two if I'm bold. I think for leaders, being willing to invest in your team is key. And whatever that team needs is what you need to give them, right? I think stepping back and being a coach and helping them grow both as professionals and as people it ultimately matters.
I cannot argue with that. Brilliant. Thank you. Brian, let's go with you.
Sure. Something that I see is sort of lacking, particularly around larger companies, is people that are trying to push their own solution to these developer experience problems rather than having the humility to try and seek the correct answer to these problems. And big companies, I'm not going to name any, but I think you can fill in the blank here. Reward people that come out with novel ideas, and it's more important that rewards people trying to seek their own solutions rather than trying to find the best solution, which may not have come from you or from your employees. So yeah, leaders that try and find the best solution no matter the providence, I think is hard, particularly in large companies these days.
Yeah, it's sometimes we do what we know, and it does take a lot of humility to experiment and say, well, maybe what I know that works, maybe it will work, but maybe it won't, and let's experiment both ways and take the time to do that. I mean, if it's working, it's working. There's no arguing there. But when it's not working, what do you do? Thank you, Brian. Soumeya, your turn.
Yeah, I'm gonna share 3 points because I work with a lot of different developer teams throughout the year, different cultures, different companies, and the 3 are basic one, like bottom ground level psychological safety. Build that in your teams. If you don't have that, all that follows from what I'm gonna say, and I imagine what Emily said and what Brian said don't apply, because you need that first. And then the second one is the ability to unblock your teams. That takes different forms in different ways in different cultures. Unblocking them in terms of having them use the technology they want to, or unblocking them and giving them valuable things to work on, creating the space for them to actually do the work they're meant to work on and deliver the value that all of you want to deliver. And then the last one is the ability to say no. And this is particularly it resonates with me like this week and for the past few weeks, because I've seen what happens when the managers of developers don't know how to say no. I have also seen ones who always say no, and so there is a middle ground. There is a healthy place to be, and always striving to be there is, I think, a worthy goal.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to thank you all so very much. This for me is turned out to be something that I would not only recommend people listen to, but listen multiple times. There were so many gems here. I resonated with absolutely every single thing that was said, and I think there was a lot of variety in ideas that were exposed here. We really didn't go with we all saying the same thing. It was a lot of saying of brilliant things, but very different and unique, and I loved it. And I learned about the DORA reports. Did not know the DORA metrics. I did not know about that. Thank you. And so this is definitely for people who are in position of leadership, and for the developers themselves to help manage up, right? The whole help people help you. So there's brilliance here for everyone to benefit from. I could not be more grateful to have been able to moderate you all, and see you around.
Thank you for having us. Before we log off real quick, I just wanted to say thank you. These events take a whole lot of folks. It's not just us. So shout out to Jenna and Handa who have made this possible.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Till next
Bye.
time.